Ethical issues in the issues and debate section of paper 3. A key point here is that students waste a lot of time describing what the ethical issues are to no avail and earning themselves no marks at all. So be very careful not to waste your time just saying this is deception and psychologists do this is informed consent and psychologists do this to deal with it. That won't get you any marks. Keep it focused on the things I've got on this sheet and you will not go wrong. So let's get started. First of all, we need to think about implications, okay? So first points here are completely AO1. All of psychology research and theory may in some way impinge on people's human rights, and therefore it may have an influence on public policy in what the government does, okay? So you need to think of it as it's not just psychology, it could actually, things that we do in psychology could actually lead to people making changes in the law, okay? 2, there may be very often a huge conflict between methods that psychologists have to use and the actual dignity of the participants. A key example, Milgram, okay, because you saw how the participants got really upset, they lost their human dignity, and at the end of it they felt perhaps very bad about themselves. Number 3, it is also possible for findings to be misrepresented in the wider media, and actually researchers have little control of this. That's an ethical issue because, you know, when the media get hold of some research, they can blow it up and make it seem worse than what it is. I'd make a note here, particularly for correlational research. Okay, because in the media, they will forget to say, we can't say cause and effect. And it just depends where this is in the media. For the general public, they have no understanding of correlational data, and therefore they could come to the wrong conclusions about things, okay? And actually, that's not the fault of psychology or psychologists, but that's just what tends to happen in the media. Finally, socially sensitive research is a key thing here. We are trying to do everything we can to minimize harm to our participants, but there are many areas in psychology that are socially sensitive. E.g., here's some areas. When we are looking at sexuality, when we are looking at race or IQ, or, you know, maybe genetic basis for sort of violent behaviour. Now, these are areas that the public love to hear about, and they make really good publicity for psychology, but they are very socially sensitive. And anybody could be reading this research and could actually even become suicidal by reading the research, or it could have very bad implications. But again, in some ways, it's out of the control of psychologists in some way, okay, because the research has to be done, but we can't sort of help that it is socially sensitive research. Okay, so let's look at this in a tiny bit more detail now. Socially sensitive research and ethics. Now, these guys in 1988 had these 4 points to make, which are really good to learn. Okay, number 1, implications. Some studies seem to give acceptance, to the idea that there are completely racial differences and IQ differences that may be based on gender and sometimes on race. And that's a horrible implication to be trying to make, but some of these studies have those sort of results. And what can we do about it? Nothing. There they are. Second point, uses. If the wrong person gets a hold of these studies, they could decide to make laws which actually discriminate against people, and that would be really bad. Okay, I'll give you one thing. I mean, the gender idea that when we look at IQ across the genders, we find that generally men tend to have a higher IQ, and this could be really seeming to say that men are more intelligent. No, because at the other end of the perspective, research shows that more men have lower IQ than women. So it needs to be balanced out, okay? But it could get into the wrong hands and have the wrong results. Finally, how valid is the research? We need to be very careful to see that this socially sensitive research is actually valid in itself, because sometimes it's not. A key example was, this guy called Burt in 1955, who actually carried out research for the then Labour government, I believe. And it was to decide if intelligence is actually genetic. And, on the basis of his fraudulent research, the whole grammar school system in the UK was built. Okay, so he found, yes, it is genetic. People are genetically programmed to be more intelligent than other people. Therefore, we're going to cream off all the brainy kids and we're going to put them into grammar schools. And all the rest can just go into some secondary modern schools and learn to cook and sew and do carpentry. Basically, that's a pretty harsh way, but that was the way things actually did go in the 1950s and 60s. But his research was completely false. It was fraudulent. I think you need to Google it. Okay, so there's the key things that you need to be aware of in socially sensitive research and ethics. Finally, let's have some AO3 points. First, AO3 point. There is a very strong argument that we need to continue to do research into controversial areas, e.g. gender, race, IQ, whatever, sexuality, and not shy, away from these, because if we do, underrepresented groups in society will not have a voice. So even though it can have some bad implications if the research maybe gets into the wrong hands, that doesn't mean that we should not do the research. Secondly, eyewitness testimony and socially sensitive research has actually benefited society and the legal system. Because, and here we are particularly looking at Elizabeth Loftus's research, many people have been released from jail on the basis of a reassessment of unreliable eyewitness accounts. So it's a very controversial area, very sensitive, but still it's had a huge benefit. Now, these two researchers have argued that actually sometimes when psychologists have done research into alternative relationships, such as different sexualities and gay relationships, they have been guilty of framing questions in such a way as to suggest that heterosexual relationships are superior. So they have identified a key thing which, here in this particular area, psychologists must be cautious about. Therefore, how psychologists frame their questions in these socially sensitive areas, not just in this particular area, is very important. Okay, so I hope that was a very useful sheet for you all. Just have a check of it. It is below the video and you can cut and paste it. Okay, good luck to everybody.